Let's go ahead and hit record. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to coaching. This morning, we're talking about seller protection disclosure. Or it could be called something else. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right word. But I'm joined here by our attorney, Mark O'Brien. Thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone.
And of course, our brokers that are on. Thanks, Kevin and Craig. That's who I can see so far. And I have to give a little credit here to Jill Stringham for bringing this idea to me, and it's kind of been simmering for about a month or so. And so here's let's get a running start at this topic. I think there's things that sellers need to know, and you're not finding them directly in the forms we already have. And so again, running start, if we can show complexities and problem in our presentation, then we can present solution, and then when we do that, we create value. Boy, I've said that, you must be tired of me saying this, but not Julie. Okay, so yeah, problem or complexity, solution presented will create value. And so the problem that we have is people don't know what the problem is, and we're our own worst enemy because we just simply make it look too easy. Okay, so a lot of this, we have collateral or assets. We've been calling our forms legal assets, or marketing materials or collateral and visuals that we use to present. So today, I'd like to birth an idea maybe here for a form or a marketing or collateral piece. And Mark and I kind of got excited about this a couple of weeks ago when we tackled the fair housing issue. And we were warning sellers to be objective in their selection of offers and not looking at protected classes as a way of selecting, say, a buyer. Like I want a family with kids to have my house. We can't choose offers that way. So because we don't want, remember, the seller would be at the crosshairs there, and they're the ones who would be subject to a lawsuit. So generally speaking, Mark, running start without getting to specifics, you want to add anything to this? Or, your point of view on, educating our sellers on potentially litigious situations?
Yes, no, I think that, the genesis of this for us was really kind of the Fair Housing Act. And, we saw it as an opportunity to put some advice, add some value to our sellers in raising these issues that they don't often think of. They think of price and terms and looking at the four corners of the REPC, but there's all these other issues where we can, again, add value and advise sellers of these pitfalls that they're presented with throughout the course of negotiating the contract. And, one of them is kind of, once the offer is accepted, the seller really loses a lot of power in the negotiation because the seller doesn't have the ability to cancel. Well, the seller needs to be advised of all these items that we're going to go through before they kind of give up that power, and the power shifts to, at least control of the transaction really shifts to the buyer. So I think before that is done, we have an opportunity, based on this list of seller protections, to really advise and add value to the process for our sellers. And I think it's a great opportunity for our listing agents to do so.
Well said, Mark. Thanks. Okay. How about we do this then? You guys, I don't have like a handout for you. It's not in your manual. We'll certainly be adding this to the next iteration. So get ready to take some notes here. Perhaps I could send an email out with some of the bullet points later, but the way these things typically go is we get the collaboration today. Mark and I will come together and do a draft 2, 3, and then I guess we can decide whether this is marketing and we need some, graphics or something like that around it, or is this going to be a form? So we'll see where this goes. Okay. So right now, let's take notes. Everybody good? Okay, let's start off with the two that we've already discussed. Number one is that the seller needs to understand their contractual obligations and frankly, that there's no seller cancellation in the REPC. So that would be, I think, the first thing to warn a seller of is seller, you need to understand that there is no cancellation for you once you're under contract. Okay, that's number one. Kind of under this understanding contractual obligations is this as is protection. And though we have it referenced in 10.2 and 10.3, I think sellers often ask us things like, do I have to disclose? Do I have to disclose? Do I have to disclose? And of course, we've had previous classes where we changed this. Remember, we called the class, to disclose or not to disclose, to be or not to be. But we changed the question to not do you have to disclose, but whether you should disclose as part of a strategy. Okay, part of a legal strategy, right?
Right.
So I think we need a reminder here that most of the litigation happens around misrepresentation of material facts or adverse material facts. So, or information for that matter, fact or information, however you want to call it. Okay, so gosh, Mark, that's kind of how I see it as a warning. Most litigation is centered around misrepresentation. So be very clear, reference 10.2 and 10.3. What you say about this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the 4 or 5 cases I've seen this year all center around seller disclosures, whether or not they were adequate, whether or not, in some instances, whether or not the agent actually knew and should have disclosed, because the agent actually has an obligation to disclose as well. Material items that the seller does not disclose. I see this as a real opportunity for, again, adding value to your sellers by having them focus on this, the seller disclosures. I think it's too often overlooked. There's a way to get into the safe harbor of as is. We've talked about this before, but the way to get into the as is safe harbor is to have your seller fully disclose and take time. And I think it's important that sellers demonstrate that they took time with the seller disclosure form. How many of you have seen a seller disclosure form where there's a line straight from the top to the bottom of the page through nose? That is a litigator's dream to see something like that if they're suing a seller based on lack of disclosure, because there's no time. That says to me the seller didn't take time. What you really want to see is, the checks in there, and I'd love to see an exhibit, attached pages where the seller explains the yes answers in detail. That's where you can really help your seller walk them into the safe harbor of as is. So being able to explain 10.2 and 10.3 and what the seller's contractual obligations are very important in representing sellers.
So what I was thinking here is that because we see 10.2, 10.3, and we've got the warning in the property condition disclosure, but you know what we're not saying? We're not saying that this is where litigation happens. Like it's overwhelming, you guys.
Right.
It's like 80, 90% of cases is centered around sellers not disclosing. So that's what we can say in this form is that, hey, we're warning you. Litigation happens here, so be careful. Okay, let's go to the next one. And we already talked about this, but we're talking about the ones we've already kind of covered. But what was it? Fair housing. Right. So this is an objective selection of offers based on terms and price, and not about facts we know about the buyer. I had a call from one of our managers actually, who has a transaction going on personally, and Mark, they said, hey, can you tell me a little bit about the buyer? Well, the other side took that as a green light to write what these pick-me letters are. And that's not what our agent was asking, agent/manager. They weren't asking that at all. But what they got was this information, about familial status, about friends they had in the neighborhood. There was some suggestion that it may be a religious affiliation tie there. And that's not what they were wanting. So we need to define what an objective selection process is and what it's not. And I think, thank goodness for Mark, because he's really good at that. So what do you think, Mark? You can hit this one out of the park, right?
Well, sure. I mean, objective, it's largely price in terms and items you can put your finger on, like a pre-qualification letter. Those are things that it would be fair to respond. Tell me about my buyer or my potential buyer. Well, kind of here's what they're thinking about presenting in terms of an offer. They have a great pre-qualification letter. They're a cash buyer. That doesn't say anything about protected classes. And you'll want to advise your seller, be careful about asking that question. And you can do that, in a listing meeting up front. Be careful about what you want to know about the buyer, because it can come back to haunt you.
Perfect. Okay. And I'm thinking about my list here, and Mark and I have the same notes, but I'm wondering if we should put underneath the understanding contractual obligations. I'm not sure sellers understand. Well, frankly, there's probably realtors who don't understand this, but go down to where it says rep see definitions of timing. We've got contractual definitions that are very, I don't know, they just don't read well. This is why they're often missed. But I'm talking about the difference in settlement, funding, recording, walkthroughs, possession. See, all these things are related to each other, and domino, we know that. But I don't think that sellers understand, because they take offers that say that they'll move out the day it records. And then that's a shock to them. I've told you guys before about the seller who told me he wasn't going to pack a fork. I'm not packing a fork until I have my money. And I'm like, well, I think you could leave the forks. They'd be fine. You could pack everything else. Anyway, you kind of get the point. Would you guys, knowing what you know, would you pack up your house, pay the movers, and do all that when there's no money paid yet? You've received no money, knowing what you know? I mean, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. But boy, you'd be nervous about it, wouldn't you? So maybe we need to have our sellers understand the difference in, look, this is when you're going to get your money, when it records and funds. These are tied together, but there's a gap here between when you move out and delivering possession. And of course, we have, this whole process of buyers on the other side are asking, can I move in? Can I move in? Can I move in? Can I move in? I hate to look, one of the little, yeah. I'm like, do I even want to say this? All right, I'll say it. You guys are smart enough to know how to manage it. Okay. But here's some of these situations. Mark, help me out if I get on the cliff. I'm already on the cliff. You guys, geez, what's this cliff? Well, here's the scenario related to this. Okay. So the seller calls me up and says, I've got a question. I want to confirm something. It's Friday, by the way. The buyer's already signed. The buyer wants to move in Saturday. The seller doesn't want to move out Saturday. They want Saturday and Sunday, and they want to tell the buyer to move in on Monday. Okay. So, but here's the problem. It's got to record, right? You guys understand where I'm going with this? It's got to record. Okay, so the seller manipulates the situation because you've got so many days from settlement for it to record. You have 4 calendar days, and settlement was on Thursday. No, it was on Thursday. No, it was on Friday. Settlement's on Friday. So what do they elect to do? They don't settle until like 4:55 on a Friday. Why did they do that? Because it's impossible to record. It can't record till Monday, and buyer contractually doesn't take possession until recording. That's not what we should be doing. And again, it points back to this. No one understands the definition of these terms. Otherwise, we wouldn't be manipulating things like that, right? And certainly, why is it a shock to anyone? Because that is what the contract says. So unfortunately, I had to tell the seller, well, that is true. But if you don't settle today, you're in default, and now you're subject to breach. And the language around that, you don't want to find yourself in breach. So if I sign at 4:55, am I in good? I said, well, the contract does say 5 p.m., doesn't it, guys? So you can see the problem here. We need to have an education on possession and moving out and all of this stuff. So that's another one. I think we need that reminder. Okay. And to me, Mark, that does sound like something marketing could do, because it's like you want to teach it visually and simplify it.
Absolutely. If settlement is on such and such a date, here's the potentials for recording and possession.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
you could call it the week or something there. You know, it kind of
Right.
has a sliding scale. It can be as soon as, but as late as.
Right.
Do you guys like this idea? Yeah. Okay.
And there's nothing, we could probably teach a whole class on this, but there's nothing that would prevent closing to occur in a shorter period of time after settlement. The parties could agree that the recording would happen sooner than the 4 calendar days as part of their REPSI.
Yeah. I mean, it could be another term that's countered. And
Yeah, absolutely. To ensure that you don't have this Friday issue.
I just thought of something else that should go in that group is short-term lease back. And, you know, because we're talking about possession, but there, you know, maybe this is the place we put short-term lease back in just a simple, you know, definition of what that is.
Yes, we'll talk a little bit about that in next week's sales meetings. That's part of the topic for the legal spotlight, if you will. You still haven't given me a good name for a catchy name for that, but
yeah, okay.
But we'll be talking about the new short-term leaseback addendum, which replaces the short-term leaseback agreement, which many of you are maybe familiar with. Why they did that and what are the implications for that. So that's
very good.
teaser.
Mary, thanks for the comment. Everyone take a look at that in the chat. It's well stated. I mean, I think if we've got one of our grand purposes at Berkshire is to be the example of what it means to be a professional when it comes to writing contracts and knowing our agreements. And we should be absolute masters of this and know it frontwards, backwards, sideways. You should be able to, you know, really refer. You've heard me say, well, last coaching was all about using the manual and the forms to present because it shows your proficiency instead of you telling everyone you're proficient. You want to show them, and a perfect way to do that is to use forms. So very good. All right, let's do a couple more. We got a lot to cover here. These are not in any particular order, but I think right now, think about the safety of the buyers who are going to come look at the property and the realtors that are going to be showing the property. Right now, you know, we don't have snow on the walks now, but we're going to. So, but things like handrails or things that could be a hazard in the property, think that through, seller, because if there is something that could be a hazard, we've got to address that. Otherwise, you're going to get a slip and fall case against you. And Mark, we've had these in the company, haven't we?
Yes, we have. Yeah, it's the seller is obligated to make sure that their property is safe for folks walking through. If your front stoop, if you knew about it, that it ices and becomes very slippery in the winter, you have an obligation to make it safe for your guests, your invitees who potential buyers are.
Okay, related to that, getting the house ready is removing personal belongings and dealing with issues like, so this would be in our included items, but it's security cameras. A lot of these sellers want to take these, they're mounted. It comes an argument, right? It used to be TVs, guys. Well, no, back up. It was refrigerators, then it was water softeners, then it was TVs, and now it's security cameras. Okay, so.
And it's also Tesla car chargers.
Yes.
That one's come up 3 or 4 times in the past year or so.
Yeah, we had a guy who said he's taking the Tesla charger. You guys, it's hardwired by an electrician into the panel. He's like, I'm taking this. And we're like, you can't.
Right.
We ended up looking up how much a new Tesla charger was. And I think one of our agents just decided to buy him a new Tesla charger. And, you know, anyway, I think we need some reminders about included items and being, you know, get your personal belongings that, you know, might be sensitive and let's put them away. Okay. Okay. I'm going down the list, Mark, and now I'm to like rental histories. And this is a very dangerous place where we're accurate in delivering either income about the property or expenses related to the property to maintain its income. And this is very akin to the seller disclosure and being accurate and thorough. Because if we're not, they're going to rely on it. If they rely on it, it's inaccurate, then we're going to see a case. And I think we brought this up in the code of ethics class. Didn't we have a case scenario about this? So
Right.
there's some no-goes there too. When you don't want to project profitability of any property. That's not coming from you. No realtor should ever say, here's what you're going to make on this property. So if you do, you're going to find yourself again in the crosshairs, because they're going to say, well, that's what Will told me, I would make. And here's the email in which he said, this is a great investment property. It will make you this much per year. Instead, you're passing on information that they can determine whether or not that that's duplicatable into the future, right? Not you.
Those rental histories are more often than not seller disclosures, and you should treat them as any other seller disclosure. You're an intermediary, a pass-through for those items, not making any representation or warranties as to whether or not they're accurate.
Okay, here's the next one, guys. It's clearing title. You would not believe, we had a case, Mark, remember the chiropractor who moved from California to Utah. He had a tax lien on the property in excess of the value of the property. So if I remember right, our sales price like $850, the tax lien was like $925,000.
Right.
And he found himself under contract before he discovered this lien. Now, digging into it, probably embarrassed about it, didn't think it would follow him to Utah. Well, it was a federal tax lien. I mean, but we're already into contract and this is discovered. So, I think we get, again, we make it look too easy. We just list a property. No, we don't. We do the research before it goes on the market to make sure. This is where we get our PRs from our title companies to make sure we can clear title. And we've got to be very, very careful of that. I put liens on there too, because some sellers have remodeled lately and we need to ask about lien waivers.
Right.
It's interesting. Maybe you guys don't know that. Well, Blake does. Blake knows that I am now taking the broker in classes and need to pass the broker test for Idaho. Okay, I think it's, I'm learning a lot. Actually, Idaho is a lot better put together in some areas than Utah. I know that might be a shock to you guys, but I'm frankly pretty impressed. Well, on this issue of liens, they require lien releases, and they require disclosure from the contractor before the work even starts. And there's notices in there that any consumer of services from a general contractor has a right to obtain lien releases. And I think that's interesting. So, now we go get a house on the market. You notice they've done remodels. You need to ask them, how long ago was the work? Do you have lien releases? Is there any potential mechanics lien here? And we've seen that come up every once in a while. Okay. The other one is this right to sign. And it does mention it in the REPC that, the authority of signers.
Right.
But I think it comes up a lot that, do you really and truly have the right to sign on behalf of your LLC or the trust? And, I think we could explain that in simple terms, and a reminder that you do need to have proper documentation to have the evidence to support that you have the right to sign.
That's right. We also had a situation recently of an elderly seller that was incapable of signing, and the daughter, I believe it was, Will, didn't have a power of attorney, didn't have any way to transfer the property. And so they were, more or less stuck with having to go to hire an attorney and have a court order allowing for the transfer of the property, because no one had authority to sign. And unfortunately, the older woman was unable to do so. So planning for that ahead, if you have an elderly seller or have a situation where you might suspect inability to execute the transfer documents, would be a good idea.
Great. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is earnest money held at title. And yes, I know we have a form for this, but I don't think we explain why that can be a problem to sellers. So again, running start at this, if you don't know why that's a problem, remember, as a matter of fact, if you guys have your book, you have your manual, yes or no? If you have your manual on page 213 in the legal chapter, we've highlighted, you can see on page 215, we've highlighted every place in the REPC where it states that no further authorization is required to release earnest money. Okay. The reason that's a problem is that title is governed by a law that says they have to have both signatures to release earnest money, regardless of what contractual agreements the party have. Okay. So what that means is that the REPC, all that language in the REPC, you can see there's 2 on page 215. There's another 2 on 216. I've marked, actually 3. And so there's 5 places, I think.
Total.
Yeah, 5 total, right. 5 total in the REPC that say no further written authorization. So we essentially would be changing that to say that we'd still have to have written authorization.
Right. And as Will alluded to, title companies are governed by the Division of Insurance, not the Division of Real Estate. That's why we can't contract around with our buyer and seller the ability to instruct them to release earnest money. They're governed by their own regulations and rules through the Department of Insurance.
You know, every chance I get, I like to remind agents that when they went to school and they learned, you know, basic contract fundamentals, that it still applies. But remember, you can't contract out of a law. You know, it has to have a legal purpose. You know, it has to fit legal purpose. So, you know, I think that's just an interesting principle to remember. You can't contract out of a law. The law will trump whatever the agreement is. Okay. Okay, going down the list. This is kind of a warning to when a seller may interact with buyers or buyers' agents to not share confidential information. So it's likely they may run across an agent who represents the buyer. So we're kind of warning them that, look, other agents represent the buyer. Even from our own company, they represent the buyer. So be careful of sensitive information that might harm your bargaining position is what the disclosure would be. And so what would those things be? Well, things like, you know, maybe things that you want to leave with the property. Are you okay to leave? They're starting, inadvertently, you start finding negotiations happening with some discussions. And if their agent's not there to protect them, then they could just out of kindness, I guess, just start offering up things that might weaken their position. So we want to be careful of that. I got a few more here. I would like to highlight the benefits of having a home warranty because this lowers litigation. And I think there's real benefits there without overselling it. I just get looking at it like a legal strategy.
Yeah, it provides an avenue to resolve disputes that would otherwise be between buyer and seller with regard to who's going to pay for the dishwasher. It just gives you another option and for relatively minimal cost.
Yeah, I think we're a fan of it to lower, you know, legal risk. Guys, just remember big picture. I'm just trying to tie, you know, some of the fun, and some of you are new to the company. So the number one thing we do at Brookshire, our number one purpose is to net sellers the best bottom line. That's why we exist. Okay, that's our purpose, to net them the most. Okay, so akin to that is getting the highest price. That's why we have marketing exposure. That's why we speak to the large demographic of buyers, make it easy for people. Our marketing is pretty. Another one is to lower legal risk in real estate transactions. That's our purpose. That's our reason. That's our why, to lower legal risk. So a lot of these things come back to this core fundamental benefit. Remember, people buy benefit, not the thing you do. So and don't assume that they get it. You're going to have to translate it. So you have to say things like, look, when part of our strategy in lowering legal risk is to purchase a home warranty, because that's what it does, is it lowers your legal risk in the real estate transaction. And they go, okay, got it, right? That's why we do this. Lowering legal risk is part of our reason. Okay. Sorry if I'm driving anyone nuts. I could, if I am, I'm totally sorry. Look, you guys already know this. If I won the lottery and had $300 million, I'd still be doing this every Wednesday. Now, look, I might be doing it from a boat in the Caribbean. Hey, okay, guess what? You'd all be on the boat with me. There you go. Now I'm getting it. I have no practice at being a billionaire. So, okay, here's another one that's got it. It's really important. Write this one down. This is dealing with multiple offers, but look, we've got disclosures for this, and but it's kind of like it's already upon you, and now you're starting to deal with it. Here, but remember, our code of ethics is that we need prior instruction. Like, if I get multiple offers, how do you want me to handle this? Okay, we don't have any discussion like that with sellers, like we should. It's just, we get a multiple offer, then we call and tell them we've got it, and then we ask, how do you want to handle it? By that time, it might be too late, because you may have already had an agent call you and say, hey, Julie, how many offers do you have? And we need the seller's permission to say whether we have multiple offers or not, okay? So I think we need that in this disclosure. You guys agree? Okay, good. Sally says I might need an intervention. I'm going to be hauled away. No, don't take me. Where are we going? It's time for your intervention. Well, you're just too passionate. I mean, come on. Okay. Yeah, Bettina, I think your comment there about sellers get one. Yes, there is some free coverage with that. And yet providing that for the buyer is a good way to lower legal risk. So if we don't purchase one for the buyer, then it terminates, when the listing is purchased. So we want to keep that protection going. That's what we're saying. Okay, here's another one. This one's coming up, and man, it really makes me nervous that the hot market is causing buyers to remove conditions out of the rep sheet, right? To make their offer look better. Okay, so they're doing things like, well, I don't want a financing condition. Don't worry about the appraisal. And they've even go so far as to say, I don't need a due diligence. Well, we're going to have to warn our sellers that that's not best for them. You do not want your buyer closing on this property without having an opportunity to inspect. Mark, I'm going back to the definition of, say, fraudulent, transactions. And one of the questions that would come up is, did the buyer have an opportunity to inspect? And if the answer is they did not, then it's easily to assume that it was concealed. And if it was concealed, it was either intentionally or unintentionally. Either way, it harmed somebody. And this is a problem. Okay, we need our buyers to conduct due diligence. So I'm telling our listing agents, again, that does not make the offer better when they remove due diligence. So we're going to put that in this disclosure. You want your buyer to conduct inspection. You want them to have opportunity to inspect, hire their experts, and then make their own decision on whether or not they want to purchase and move forward. So I think, Mark, this is going to tie back into that misrepresentation litigation that we see with poor disclosure, that we'd see the same kind of case.
I think it does too. And to really get the benefit of, if you look at our buyer's due diligence checklist, for example, and the seller property condition disclosure, there's all sorts of exculpatory language in there for the seller and for the brokerage and the agents that puts the onus to perform due diligence on the buyer. Well, that assumes that the buyer is going to have an adequate opportunity to actually conduct that due diligence and is going to do so. When the buyer says no due diligence condition, or the buyer says I'll conduct my due diligence in one day, that should be a red flag. that exposes the seller to maybe not as much protection from those exculpatory provisions in the SPCD and the buyer due diligence checklist that you might otherwise have if the buyer conducted adequate due diligence.
Well said. Don't you love Mark's big words? You have to go to law school to get those. You know that, right?
Exculpatories, get out of jail free.
I love it. I really do love it. I've already confessed that I've watched West Virginia Law School puts their classes on YouTube. So guess what I listen to for fun? I listen to their law classes. Okay, fine. I'll do the intervention. Okay, I'll do the intervention. I just asked that I can still talk with my grandkids. Bev Beck asked a question about an agent purchasing the warranty. How do you feel about that, Mark?
Obviously, the question begs the answer of it's better if the seller, in our instance, purchases the policy on their own volition, on their own dime. If it's a worst case scenario, I don't really have a problem with a credit at closing for that amount. I think that's part of our service, and it's such a nominal amount that it's not really material in my view.
Okay.
But I would prefer that the seller make the decision to purchase it on their own.
Okay, another question, Mark, and let me fill in some of this because this is kind of spontaneous here. But Kimmy's bringing up a question about a form that we have in the forms manual, and it's a legacy form, I guess. It's been there a while, and I guess I wasn't paying much attention to it. It's not a really great form. It's very basic. But the idea of this declination of home inspection, guys, is that if the buyer insists on not conducting inspections, that we make them sign this form. That's a warning that it's going contrary to our advice. So look, we told you to conduct one. You decided not to anyway, and that they acknowledge that we told them that they need to conduct this inspection. I think the form needs a redo, Kimmy. That's why we've been pausing on this. And I think we got to get a position on whether or not we'd even allow it, so if we give you an instrument that allows a buyer to not have the inspection, are we going to increase the number of buyers who are going to do this? So we didn't want to, it's kind of one of those unintended consequences. I mean, I don't want to encourage them. So instead, I'm telling our listing agents, if it happens to you on your side, make sure you counter it. And if you're on the buyer side authoring this, remind your buyer, it's probably the biggest thing they're going to do in this transaction. It's the most important thing they're going to do. So, that's kind of where I'm stuck, Kimmy. Mark, you feel the same way?
I agree. I think, on the buyer side, obviously, we would never advise a buyer not to conduct due diligence. Why would you not take your opportunity to kick the tires? So I think it should be, like we're saying, it should be a red flag for sellers as well. So I don't think we want necessarily a form in circulation that encourages or provides a mechanism for declining due diligence. I do think it's important that we have that capability for the agents and for the brokerage to kind of tie up that end in the very unlikely circumstance where a buyer elects not to conduct due diligence. But I don't think it should be a form in circulation.
I mean, maybe if they conducted something and then they canceled and they came back and wrote a new offer and they said, look, I've already done all these tests. And I mean, that's about the only scenario where I could get on board with them kind of writing an offer that didn't have conditions because they already did it in a previous failed or canceled offer.
Sure, I can see that.
Yeah. So Kimmy, did you go under contract with no condition of due diligence? No, you did not. You had the condition. Okay. So they had the condition and then they didn't do the inspection. If you guys are reading the chat there, I think that comes up. And so you're wanting to put them on notice. Is that it? All right, Mark, let's think about it. Let's put our heads around this one and see what we want to do there. You know what, maybe it could be added to that buyer due diligence checklist addendum that we've got.
Right.
Where we add a section there. You know, if you guys are not familiar with that form, it should be one of your favorite forms, because when you're presenting to buyers, you've got a document that talks about your expertise and strategies that you use in order to help them win the bid, but it also protects you that the choices that they make to employ any of these strategies were their choice, and that you didn't make them do this. Like, for example, paying over full price. I don't want that to come back and bite you, where someone makes a case that you breached your fiduciary duty of loyalty to them and put your own needs of making a sale above what they wanted to do, and they were forced into paying more because of your instructions. You need to love that form and use it and teach from it and present from it, because it will naturally create the value in you as a buyer's agent. So I don't know, maybe we could add there. Kim Phipps has got something. Joe, can you do that, or can I? Where is she?
I'm right here. Hey, Will, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Kim. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I like your and Mark's perspective on this form. I will say, when I first became a realtor 15 years ago, the brokerage I was at, this was a mandatory form. It was, not this exact one, but it was a similar that we had to have the buyers sign if they opted out of a home inspection. I really loved it, because I've just actually recently had a situation where the buyer bought the home sight unseen, and he opted out of a home inspection against my advice. He shows up to the home and he has concerns about a couple of different things. I wish I would have had something like this for him to sign, because we had the conversation, but I don't have anything to go back to in place to be like, you remember we talked about this and you signed right here saying you didn't want it. So that's kind of my perspective. I like it. I would like to have something in place for that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, that was the scenario I was going to raise, is out-of-state buyers, especially in the current market. I can see that happening.
Yeah.
And the importance of having some sort of form to fall back on. I mean, we do have the buyer's due diligence checklist, which I'm sure you had signed, which does have that sort of language in there. If you decide not to do these inspections, you're going against our advice. So there's some protections there, but I don't disagree with you at all. I think it would be nice in that instance to have a form, a formal signed. I acknowledge that I've declined your advice.
Thank you.
I'm trying to find where that language is exactly. It does. I'm looking at the buyer due diligence checklist under physical condition. Where is that language that says that if you opt to not have an inspection, you're going contrary to the company's advice?
I don't have it in front of me. I apologize, Will.
Okay, Craig, do you know? Kevin, do you know where that, Rachel, all of our A students, professors, where is that language that says if you do not get an inspection, you're going against the company's advice? Is that in the buyer agreement? First one to find it gets a gift certificate. I don't know how much yet. I might have a $25 one. I found it.
Does that mean we have to buy you a gift certificate?
Okay, I'm taking my own gift certificate. Kimmy, did you find it? You found it, didn't you? Where is it? go ahead. There you go.
Can you hear me? Is
Yeah.
it in the buyer, section 6 of the buyer broker agreement?
Yeah, that's where it is. Yeah,
Hey,
nice job.
student.
Yeah, it says if the buyer fails to do so, okay, let's back up. Okay, so the company strongly recommends that the buyer engage at the buyer's expense and conduct these inspections, right? If the buyer fails to do so, the buyer is acting contrary to the advice of the company. So section 6, buyer agency agreement. Okay, so a great sentence. That's how strongly we feel about them conducting these inspections.
That's an exculpatory sentence, Will.
Is that what it is? Okay. Is that going to be our word of the day?
I think so, for you and I.
Okay. Okay. Rachel says we have our own inspector memo. I'd love to see that.
Yes, I
Rachel,
saw that as well.
send it over. Okay, Allison, email trails are always a good backup. Yep. Good point, Allison. Okay, let me ask you generically, is there something that you want to tell sellers that you don't find in the agreements that you want to warn them of? Something that's not on this list? That's all I've got. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Well, it's under kind of protecting personal belongings, but I could have sworn on your list we had dangerous items such as like guns. I think guns are, I thought I saw that somewhere, but I think that's an interesting issue. A lot of folks, maybe do not secure their firearms, and you have children walking through the house, and it's an attractive nuisance, as we call it.
Yeah, good point.
And another point, I saw security cameras removing those items and, determining whether or not they're personal property that will be transferred or whether or not they're fixtures. It also might be a good idea to have your sellers turn those off. We tell our buyers in the addendum to the checklist that they may be under surveillance, whether intentional or not, if they're on the property, and be aware of that their comments and actions may be able to be observed by the seller if they're recording. Maybe it's a good idea to have your seller turn that equipment off during showing so that they're not, to give the buyer a free look at the property so that you're not surveilling them without their knowledge.
Okay. Jill, I think that's great. I wrote it down. I added that to the list. I think that's great. Well, before I leave cameras, just let's remind, is it illegal for a seller to have the cameras on during a showing, Mark?
No, it's not illegal. It's part of their home security. No, it's not illegal.
Yeah, it's not illegal. As long as one person knows that it's being recorded. You can't have a third party record somebody else, but one party can, and it's their home. So it's not illegal. I'm not sure if we want to say, I don't know. I guess we'll talk about whether or not we want to warn them on that, on what trouble they could get in. Jill brings up one about the subject to sale. This is one where if you take an offer that's subject to the sale of the buyer's home, you still have a house to sell and you have no control over it. And look, the market's going to switch one day, and because it always does, and we'll be happy to take offers that are subject to sale. But that's a hard one to swallow, I think, because you're trying to tell your seller, look, you're not gonna have control over that, and maybe we need to talk about having the time clause, instigated with that active time clause and what that means to buyers, and is it a deterrent? I frankly think it is. I think when you guys see active TC, you already know you're competing against another offer. And that certainly doesn't make it more appealing. I think it makes it less appealing. So we need to talk that out. So maybe that's something that we need to say about, what's not on here? Oh my gosh, it's not on here. And it needs to be. I've been saying for 3 months that we need to present clear cooperation rules to sellers. They don't get it. We need to talk about getting their house ready, what that means. We need to talk about soft launches with inside the brokerage, what the benefit is there. Why would we want to do that? And you can't have it like if we're going to be on the market, we've got days happen. Like we're subject to the MLS policies. Side note here, everyone in Moab, we're all subject to MLS policies because we've got an issue just brewing down in Moab, you guys, where not our agent, but another company wants to think that they can rewrite the MLS rules, which they cannot do. But anyway, look, I think we need to present clear cooperation and explain that to sellers and how we get a house ready to be active on the market. It's more complicated than they understand. And we are subject to all the MLS rules. If they want the benefit of the exposure of the MLS, okay, then we have to play by the MLS rules. So we should probably have clear cooperation on there, Mark. I think that's a big one.
Yes, that is a good one.
Because you know what got me running there was explaining the disadvantage between being active on the market and active TC, and what's that doing to your buyer pool. So this is, our job as seller agent, net the most, get the best offer. So we're trying to weigh these things between, if we take an offer that's subject to a sale and even have it active TC, then that still may not be good enough. And market's driving this, guys, right? The market, if there's a lot of buyer demand, then we just politely tell someone, I know you have a home to sell. I get it under contract and come back and talk to us. Like that's usually what we're saying right now. Just come back and talk to us as soon as you're under contract, and we might, the seller may consider that. Right. And by the way, you're presenting this offer, right? You're not making that decision. The seller and you together are making that decision. So yeah, God, I knew something would be born in this class. Clear cooperation. What else, guys? We're almost out of time. We got about 5 more minutes. Anything else? Looking at the chat here. Sally's saying, what about the presence of security cameras is disclosed? I think we need to have some guidance to our sellers about their cameras and whether they're going to be listening in on this. They might be listening in on what buyers are saying. They might be listening in to agents, what agents are saying. I'm still waiting for the case. It's got to be out there, Mark. With all these cameras now, someone said something that they shouldn't say, and the seller heard it, and it damaged them.
Right.
Heaven forbid it's their own agent.
Yes.
And anyway, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure it's happened. I'll look and see what I can find, and maybe we can offer some better guidance.
Yeah, I mean, Mary, I think you're right, Mary. I think sellers are even going to want to. I mean, we're not going to talk them out of turning the cameras off. I think they want to know what's being said.
I think so too.
So,
but that in my view, that creates legal risk for the seller. If there's an issue later on and they're subpoenaed to produce any videotapes, they're going to have to turn those videotapes over relative to the buyer's visit to the property.
Yeah. You just dated yourself. Now, I understand videotape, but we might have some people who have no idea what a videotape is. My kids,
does it go to a chip or something now, or?
Yeah. When I always say, hey, rewind the tape, they're like, Dad, I have no idea what that means.
Right. I'm in the same boat.
What does it have anything to do with tape? You're talking about duct tape?
Right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm sure there's a case out there where they're watching. But this brings up something else. Remember in the I'm going to go the old days. Remember the for sale by owners who thought their houses were amazing because they had them for sale and all these people were coming through their house and they were there at every showing and oh my gosh, the compliments, you know, I love what you did with this. I love that green color you painted the wall. It just really pops. And boy, your shag cart, I would keep that, you know, I mean, no, you don't need to replace it, right? So they're just saying all these really nice things because they know the seller's listening. You know, I mean, we kind of be a little careful of that. If the buyer is in there just saying all these nice things, I don't know. Hey, when Tammy and I were down looking at a house and as a buyer in the St. George area, even though I knew there were cameras, I mean, I'm saying all kinds of nice things about this house, you know, and I had to catch myself a couple of times, you know, like, dang it, I'm giving them too much ammunition here. The big joke with us is that we saw the house. So we saw the house, we walked to the backyard first to see the pool and it was open. It was July and there's a little waiting area that's about like this, you know, where you put lounge chairs. Tammy took her sandals off and kind of raised her skirt a little bit and walked across it. By the time she got to the other side, I'm just telling you, we bought the house. And I mean, I knew we bought a pool. It came with a house. And unfortunately they heard the whole conversation. So I'm like, how do they know that we love the pool so much? I mean, not everyone loves pools, you know, you got to take care of them, you know, but they're like, yeah, we know you love the pool. I'm like, I never said that. Dang it. Yeah, I just lost my poker face. Well, let's put a bow on this. Mark, anything else? I guess we'll come up with a draft and can contemplate whether or not this needs to be a hybrid form in marketing or something. But will this help you guys if we put something together? We're in love with forms. Mark and I could go overboard, you know?
I don't necessarily think it's a form we put together for signature, but I think it's a great talking points form for our listing agents. I think it's really valuable. And going back to Will's original point is, you know, our sellers face all sorts of risks in entering into these transactions. And that's the potential problem. And you have the potential solution. And these talking points are kind of part of it. And again, that's how you add value to the process. And I think this is another tool, this is another arrow in your quiver to present to your seller clients. I think it's very valuable. I think we're going to come up with some additional talking points. I have a few in mind. I don't want to steal my thunder for next week in the visual spotlight, but so you'll see some additions as well. But I think this is a really good tool.
I agree. I think we're all looking for ways to differentiate ourselves and show the complexities, right? Because, you know, there's a lot of voices out there that say all realtors are the same. I mean, and unfortunately, we're doing this. Like our own board of realtors runs ads that says hire a realtor. Well, that is nice, but that kind of says to the public that as long as you have a realtor, you're good. The problem with that, as we all know, is that there's a huge difference in scope of what realtors offer. And so I think anything we can do to educate the public and our sellers better, our clients that we love, we're on the right trail here. One last thing I wanted to tell everybody, and I was thinking about this morning. First of all, every single one of you who took the time to join for 1 hour, just 1 hour, I commend you for doing it. It was a good decision. I think us coming together, getting re-energized, inspired, it builds confidence. We sharpen our saw. We go out there. We want to help someone. It gives you energy. But you couldn't have had that if you didn't make the simple decision to be here. So I commend you on that. I'm proud of you for taking the time. Was it worth it? Yeah. I mean, it helped me, you know, and Mark. So it was worth it for us. And we're, you know, anyway, congratulations. And I thank you for taking the time. So on behalf of Mark and Craig and Kim and Kevin and all of our managers, Mike Fondario, Kim Gimpler in St. George, you know, we love you. You're our reason. You're our drive. We're honored to work with you. You're fantastic people. And let's go out there and help someone, guys, because they need you. They need you. Let's go find them. Okay. All right. Have a wonderful day, you guys.
Great.